And we're live on YouTube.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this council meeting, another one on Zoom. And hopefully as we get off this tsunami of COVID, we can get back to a new normal. So we'll just go through the agenda. Are there any apologies? I don't believe there are. I can't see any.
Councillor Running for an early departure if the electricity goes out.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Leave of absence. No leave of absence required.
I may be away for a couple of weeks during April, just finalising those 2 weeks. I'll let you know.
Okay.
I don't see Paul.
Not here yet.
No, good point.
Oh, and no, not here yet.
Okay,
He'll surf us.
Yeah, he'll serve us. We'll just have a lateness. I know that he's going to be tied up with another meeting at 10:30, which I'll tell you about in a minute. No conflict of interest. There's no public forum. Or are there any conflicts of interest? There's been none highlighted to me in regards to this agenda. No public forum, and I think that's us in regards to that. And we'll just move straight into item 7.1 and welcome.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, can we back the horse up? We've got 2 sets of minutes to confirm.
Oh, my apologies. They don't show on here. Okay, there's 2 sets of minutes there. I'm happy to move that those are true and accurate. Is there a seconder?
I can do that, Your Worship.
Yeah, my apologies there, Fiona. I did see them too, but I've slipped there. My apologies.
And the minutes for council meetings are now included with the agenda, not like how we used to do it.
Yep. No, that's cool. Thank you. So all in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
And against? Gary, thank you. And it's great to hear the ayes too. It's a lot easier than trying to see hands waving, so I appreciate that. So we'll move directly into item 7.1 and welcome Nicola to give us an update on the around the mountains. And you will see on the hub that there is a copy of a PowerPoint type. Nicola, the screens are yours.
Thank you. I will attempt to share my screen and take you through the PowerPoint as I go. So I will try to do that now. We'll see if technology plays the game.
Thank you.
Okay, can you see now the PowerPoint in front of you?
Yes.
I can.
Yes.
Thank you. Yep.
Perfect, thank you. Okay. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa, ko Nicola Wills tōku ingoa, no wahapa hau. Good morning, Your Worship the Mayor, fellow councillors and Southland District Council staff. It is my pleasure to be here this morning to update you on the establishment of the Around the Mountain Cycle Trail Trust. As I said, I'm Nicola Wills. I may be familiar to a number of you councillors that have had a number of terms. I used to work as the Community Development Team Leader for Venture Southland a number of years ago for the Southland District Council via Venture. I've been back at Great South for 18 months in the Destination Development and Management space. And I'm also taking a secondment into the Beyond 2025 Southland Regional Long-Term Plan project. So got a few different hats on at the moment, but there's a lot happening in the region and it's very, very exciting to be a part of. Just as much so as there is a lot happening with the Trail Trust, and delighted to take you through that this morning. I'll pop you through here. So just very briefly, I'll take you through the trust purpose that was outlined, the process to date for the trust and the path forward. There's some pretty cool numbers and some key marketing promotion that's happened for the trust as well. So I'll sneak that into the end of the presentation, and very happy to take any questions if there's time and if there is any questions at the end. The trail purpose that was outlined by the Southland District Council on the establishment of the trust. This is the document here. So what we've identified is there's obviously ownership, project management, funding and responsibilities, and where they would sit in terms of the council and the newly formed trust. The trail manager has remained a Southland District Council employee and is working across both supporting the trust and in her current role with the council. I think it's been fair to say that we've identified as we transition some of those key roles, transition is going to be incredibly important. There are some good groundings and good things in place, and we need to make sure that as we transition the user experience, the marketing, those types of things, that we ensure that we keep pace with our service levels that have already been delivered for the trail. I'm working with the Southland District Council operational staff. They've been absolutely fabulous, and everybody's on the same page. We're all working to the same goal. It's been delightful to see. So yeah, it's going to be certainly a transition. It's taking us some time to get ourselves organised. We're working at pace, but there are a few things that need to be worked through. The process to date. So this is just a bit of a snapshot of what has been happening behind the scenes, and there has been a wee bit. Obviously, in August 2021, the Southland District Council appointed the inaugural trustees. So there is space for 7 trustees. There was 5 community representatives appointed, 1 Southland District Councillor appointed, which was Councillor Menzies, and 1 Great South representative, which is myself. A press release went out at that time to announce the trust had been established. That was in a national COVID lockdown as well, so there was a few Zoom meetings for us to meet as a trust, and we officially were able to meet in October 2021 and hold our first meeting. During that time, the Southland District Council staff had prepared a draft trustee. We were really pleased as trustees to be able to provide some input into finalising that trustee, and worked with the Southland District Council staff to have that signed. The chair appointed at the time was myself for the first term of 12 months, and we got underway. In November 2021, we attended the New Zealand Cycle Trail Forum, 2 trustees, myself and Councillor Menzies, and Susan McKenzie as trail manager. That proved invaluable. That was an opportunity to meet other trail trusts around the country, to connect with the marketing and promotions team of NZCT. MB presented to us, we had Doc present to us, Waka Kotahi, and understand the national landscape and how we fit. And it has generated some great promotional opportunities that I'll talk to you about shortly. To the side of the screen, in January 2022, we were able to receive our certificate of incorporation. So this is the rather dreary side of setting up a trust, is that there is a lot of documentation that needs to be set up and a lot of admin. And I'll be at pains to say that I'm very clear in making sure that we set the groundwork and the foundations strong. There's no point in hitting the ground running and then all of a sudden backpedaling when you need to be putting some good processes and policies in place. We're very keen to make sure that this trail is successful, this trust is successful, and the relationship with the councillors, and putting a lot of effort into making sure that administration side of things is done very well and tight. Having said that, it takes some time. So we have been incorporated. We have an IRD number now. I received an email last night. It's taken 2 months, but we are now officially received our charitable status. So we are now a charitable trust, which is fabulous. And all of those key documents are required for us to move forward to look at any sort of external funding opportunities as we move forward. We are now in the realms of setting up a bank account and working through the myriad of documentations that banks require to go through that process. This year we sat down as trustees and we had a facilitator come in, and we've had our first strategy development meeting with the trustees. So it pains to say that the trail manager and Southland District Council have done some great documents already. There is a marketing plan. This is not trying to reinvent the wheel as such. This is acknowledging the great documentation work that's been already done. But we need to work out a vision for the trust. We need to work out what our key short, long and medium goals are, how we're intending to do that. So we're starting on that journey. It will take us some time, but we had a great initial meeting in February. In March, we appointed a trustee to the vacant position. The council appointed the full complement of trustees in August. Unfortunately, before we had our first meeting in October, one of the trustees resigned due to a conflict of interest. They had a new career opportunity for them that eventuated. So at that time, the trustees decided we would look for a strengths-based appointment, and we would take our time and look to appoint with, and we've done that. So Chris Fogan joins the trust at our meeting in April. Chris has extensive background in cycling governance, cycling education and cycling tourism. He's based in Central Otago and creates some fantastic links to some of the trails in there as well, which will be advantageous for us. So we're delighted to welcome Chris to the Trust. We are planning an official partner and a community meeting for May. We are probably a little bit later than what we would have liked to have been with that, getting out to our official partners and community. COVID has made things a little bit tricky. We've had our Christmas period in between and been very sympathetic to the season for the trail. That is over that period where we didn't want to be in their face as such. We also wanted to make sure that when we went to that meeting, we had a meat on the bones as well, and we had something that we were being able to present to them as well. So we're looking forward to being engaging with both official partners in the community in May. Strategy, and for the rest of 2022, we're looking at strategy development, continuing with that, being able to engage with funders and engaging with stakeholders. But one key component I have just missed, but just recently in March, we have finalised the Memorandum of Understanding with the Southland District Council. We've worked really hard with the Southland District Council operational team, and they have been fantastic working with that as well. I think we've all realised the quantum of work that has been involved in working that. We're all working to a common goal, and it's been really fantastic for the Trust to be able to approve that MOU, which is about how we will work with one another. It's also clearly identified that there will need to be a transition of some of those responsibilities that need to go to the Trust. We have service levels that we need to maintain with our official partners through the official partner program in terms of social media and key things that we need to do. And while we're setting up the Trust, we cannot let that drop. Those service levels must be maintained, and in fact, we should look to be enhancing them. So the Southland District Council have been fantastic with that. I'd like to acknowledge the comms team, the finance team, the policy team. Apologies that I'm not identifying them individually, and in particular, Susan, the trail manager. Through that process, there was also identified an acknowledged proposed additional funding support for the Trust for the 2022-2023 financial year. Part of the proviso of me talking to you today is the Trust is very supportive of that proposal. And we see that as, again, working collaboratively together for a fantastic outcome. This is a pretty exciting slide. This is the sort of some of the key stats that I wanted to sneak in at the end of the presentation. And this graph that you're looking at here is the numbers of the trail. So essentially what we can see is year-on-year growth, and it is a fantastic good news story. So just some information to preface this is that this is 3 cycle trail seasons. The season is 1st of March to the 28th of February. So the last 21-22 season is in there. We have 5 counters on the trail that, yes, they do indicate pedestrians and cyclists, and I'll just talk about that next. There are 5 counters on the trail. You can see those listed on the left of your screen. It's been just on 20% growth from the 2021 to 2022 season, which is fantastic. You'll obviously note that we had our first COVID-19 lockdown in March 2020. So we have been a domestic market through most of this time, and yet the growth is great to see. There is a little bit of background to this just direct season of 21-22. Obviously, pedestrians is showing a bit of higher use than cyclists. So while we collect the data from the counters, there's a couple of methodologies that is applied to the data. One is in terms of cyclists and identifying if a cyclist comes and cycles the trail, then essentially they will go past 5 counters and would be technically counted 5 times. So there's methodology in place with the data to ensure that is rectified as much as possible. The other side of it is a pedestrian or a walker runner. If they are taking part in the trail, then the assumption is that they would be passing 1 counter as opposed to 5 when they are on the trail. It's also important to note for 21-22 is that the Kingston counter is a new counter. It went in December 2020, and it is showing a very high pedestrian number. And there'll be 2 reasons for that. One is the residents of Kingston are out on their daily walks using the trail, which is fantastic. So they're going up. So there's obviously the residents in Kingston that are taking that, obviously when it boys with tourists as well and people using their badge. Also, the event Race the Train was established again after a bit of had been dormant, and that was in January 2022. And that is a pedestrian-focused event where they run against the train from Fairlight through to Kingston. So that had hundreds of pedestrians going across that particular counter in January 2022. But a pretty good news story. There's some great numbers and great growth going through that trail. What are they saying? You might not be able to see on the corner of the PowerPoint there, but the overall satisfaction of the trail. So 10% is very satisfied. And this is for the previous season, 1st of March to 28th of February 2022. Anyone that completes the trail is encouraged to complete a survey. The survey is managed by New Zealand Cycle Trail Inc. It's a national survey, but they're always particularly have key questions that relate to the trail that they've done. So you can see the Around the Mountain Cycle Trail average is 8.5 and the national average is 8.9. So that's the satisfaction rate of our people using the trail, which is fantastic. Snapshot of comments from just the previous, from February 2022. You can see there's some great comments there. There's also a question that is asked of them of what could make the experience more enjoyable. Probably things that we were aware of already, but they are good to point out and we can certainly put them on our to-do list for the Trust. Last slide in terms of stats. So we've got two graphs here. I'll talk to the one on the left first. It's a percentage graph of local or visitor. So we've got two here, one showing the Around the Mountain Cycle Trail, one showing the national or all 23 great rides. The data is the previous season, 1st of March to 28th of February 2022. So this is the percentage of people that live in the area versus visiting the area that are using the trail. So we can see here that there is just under 60% of people are visiting the area that are using Around the Mountain Cycle Trail, and the split is very similar to what you would see on the national rides as well. On the right, we've got the trail influence on visiting the area. So again, this is a great news story. So there is nearly 70% of people for the Around the Mountain Cycle Trail, they visited our region because of due to the trail, or they visited due and particularly to do the trail. That was the reason that they came. So the economic benefit for that is huge for our communities that are surrounding the trail, and there are visitors coming. To preface what is local or visitor, when they're asked to answer that question, there is a map that goes up of the Around the Mountain Cycle Trail, which shows the whole area, and they are asked to say, do you live within this area or are you visiting? And that's the distinction between local and visitor. Just my last slide is just some key marketing and promotion that I'd like to just quickly run through. Again, I'd just like to preface the stats and how well the trail is going. Hats off to the Southland District Council and the investment you've put in the trail, and the trail manager, Susan McKenzie. She does a fantastic job in that community and with that trail. And as a trust, we're fantastic to come on board and support with that. Two key marketing and promotion options here, the Big Bike Film Night. So that is sessions that are shown in May and June. The promotion's been out since January. The Around the Mountain Cycle Trail, off the back of attending the NZCT, was asked if we would like to be the major prize package, which is fantastic. We've had some major exposure and nationwide exposure with that event. We're in the Tourism New Zealand Autumn campaign. There is promotion featuring a 3-day cycling package and also a new product, which is Air Milford's Ride from the Sky package as well for autumn. And the New Zealand Cycle Trail Head Signage has been an initiative that has been driven from NZCT. They have provided and funded trail signage at the start, at the head, if they call it, because you can start and finish any trail at any end. And Southland District Council is currently liaising with landowners about where they will be put. One will be in Queenstown and one will be near Queenstown Wharf. They are hoping to be installed in mid-June. So that is information on one side of the panel about the Around the Mountain Cycle Trail ride, and on the reverse of it, it says what's next, where's a similar trail that they can go in that great ride network. And Around the Mountain Cycle Trail will feature on the what's next for other trails as well. So it's about creating that connection through. So that is pretty much me in a very quick few minutes. I hope that's showing what's been happening. As the trust and the trustees, we are very conscious and realise the importance of our role and working with Southland District Council, and looking very forward to progressing this year, the trust and working together. So very happy to take any questions if there is any.
Thank you, Nicola. I just wonder if you want to take that slide off so we can see everybody. Be great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you very much for that presentation, Nicola. It was good to hear, and the energy through the transition is obvious, and I really appreciate the work that's going into this. It's been a topic of conversation with this council since well before 2013, and it's I know it's taken a few years to get it up and going, but I certainly, while I hear some criticism in some areas, when I'm actually out and about, especially when we're up in Garston, to see the people using it is brilliant. And to see Reels and Wheels parked up at Kingston, and a certain coffee shop, a coffee destination at Garston, it gets a hell of a hiding from cyclists. So there's no doubt that it is, well, I've got no reason to contest those figures. It's fantastic to see them. Councillor Kramer.
Thank you, Your Worship. An absolute fantastic result, Nicola. It's great to see, and considering the difficulty for a start, how this trail has now really come to its own. So fantastic success, and it's certainly a great economic benefit for the district itself. So it's great. It's good to see the trust up and running. And I've got a couple of questions. One is, what does the trust see as their long-term vision for that trail? And then secondly, just with the counters, are there certain areas that cyclists are using a lot less or not using at all? And if so, what do you think the barriers are as to why that's occurring and how that could be addressed? So I think that's an area that I would like to have some answers on, especially if there are areas that's not being used. We need to see why that is and what can we do about it.
Thank you, Councillor Kramer. I'll answer the counters question first, since you have just finished with that. So look, I will be at pains to say that we are a governance trust, and so the intricate details of the specific, I asked for questions around the pedestrian in Kingston. So I'll have to come back to you if there's particular points of interest in terms of those counters, and if there is lesser use. I would, so yeah, I can certainly come back to you with the answers on that. Just to preface a little bit around the promotion of the trail, it's interesting, at NZCT we were given the opportunity to have information from Angus and Associates presented to us around cycle tourism. That hasn't been released. MB and NZCT are sitting on that, but there is an appetite to be able to be showing how people can possibly use sections of a trail if people are wanting to partake in doing, say, a 4 or 5 hour ride as opposed to doing a 3-day. There's place for both. So I think for us moving forward as a trust and working with the council, we'll be making sure that we can target both those markets, because we've got great sections of the trail that can be done independently, as well as obviously selling the full package and doing the whole, the whole trail from end to end. So there's some certain huge advantages for us with our trail in terms of those two key markets. In terms of the data count, I'm sorry, I can't answer that particular question. Long-term plan, I would be at pains not to answer that on behalf of the trust at the moment, because we've had our first strategy meeting. But what we are looking at is there has already been some groundwork, and there's already some discussions. And I think in terms of being able to connect Fiordland with the trail, being able to connect that regional connectivity, so showing Southland as a key place for cycling and all the opportunities that are with that. The Heartland Ride, which takes in the Around the Mountain Cycle Trail and transverses through Southland, has now actually been completed off-road with the completion of the Invercargill Bluff section. So there's an opportunity now for the councils that work across both those TAs to work together around that Heartland Ride too, and that includes the Around the Mountain Cycle Trail. So there's certainly a lot of opportunity around that, and that will have to be part of the thinking. Part of our strategy work too is that we will be socialising that with the Southland District Council, our stakeholders as well, and it will need to have feed-in and buy-in from community and official partners as well.
That's great. That's great. Thanks, Nicole. It's that connectivity is one of the key aspects. So thanks for ticking that box. Cheers for that.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? They don't. Oh, here we go. Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't raise my hand, but yeah, thank you, Nicola. That was a very good report and a very positive report. As Gary said, it has been a long process, and at times it has been difficult. But certainly in this season, when I've been out and about on the trail, to see the number of cyclists call in at the Five Rivers CAF, seeing the number of cyclists that are staying over in Mossburn at the Wheels and Reels, I can see that it's finally, after some time, coming to, fruition, and, very pleased to share in that success with the, not so many tourists about, but the number of domestic cyclists out there is really, really inspiring, actually. So well done.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Any other comments? And I know there's been a couple of names dropped there for businesses, but that is what this whole process was about, was increasing the resilience of the businesses in the towns along the cycle trail. And I'm pretty sure that that's been noticed. I don't see Rob putting his hand up, but I'm pretty sure that all the businesses are getting something back from it. So thank you, Nicola. Thank you for your team. Thanks to Christine for representing the council through this process. And we look forward to even more cyclists on there. And I know that I was up in for Race the Train, and it was good to see Susan up there selling our wares, and it would be good to have some cyclists racing the train next time, which I think that seed's been. So Christine.
Thank you. Just want to thank Nick for her presentation. She's a bit of a cycling force to be reckoned with in terms of driving this project forward, and been doing a lot of work behind the scenes. So just wanted to note that, and also just repeat Nick's comments around the contribution of Susan and her willingness to share her knowledge, and being up, as Nick also said, not being able to start from the beginning, but just to proceed on from the great work that the team's already been doing within the council.
Thank you, Councillor Menzies. Yeah, as I said at the start, energy is great. The transition is working onwards and upwards with the team, Nicola. Absolutely. All right. Are there any further questions?
Thanks, Nicola. Great.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So I'll move that we receive the report and acknowledge the effort of the team has been acknowledged. Is there a seconder?
I can second that, Your Worship.
Seconded, Councillor Douglas. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Nicola. You're welcome to stay and listen to the rest of the meeting, but I'm pretty sure you've got other things to do. Sorry, I'll just load up my screen. So the next item on the agenda is the progress report on the annual plan. Jason, I believe you're going to be speaking to this. Follows on from other discussions.
Excellent, thank you. Good morning, Your Worship and councillors. The purpose of this report is that council resolved to proceed with the annual plan without undertaking formal consultation based on the information provided within the report. The report also seeks to provide an update to council on the progress of the annual plan 2022-23. I will take the report as read. The key issues or variations between year two and the LTP, or between year two of the LTP, sorry, and the proposed annual plan are outlined in the report. As expected, we would not anticipate significant changes in the first annual plan following the significant LTP long-term plan process that was undertaken by council, and that was adopted in June 2021. We also have a high level of consistency during the direction setting processes undertaken with community boards, with only minor project amendments proposed. Consideration has been given to section 95 and 95A of the Local Government Act and Council's significant engagement policy, and staff do not consider these issues to be significant or material. However, it is important to acknowledge that this is another substantial rates increase for the 2022-23 year, even as projected through the long-term plan. Rising costs and ongoing impacts from COVID mean this will be a difficult time for some ratepayers. Council is in the challenging position of balancing this with the need to invest in maintaining and renewing ageing infrastructure that is critical to supporting those communities, and that was consulted on and deliberated through that long-term plan process. It's also important to note that there'll be an ongoing expectation from our communities to continue to deliver on our works programs for that coming year. On the basis of the information in this report, it's proposed that formal consultation for the annual plan will not be undertaken. Following this meeting, it's proposed though to communicate information on the proposed annual plan to our communities through Council's publication First Edition, which is delivered to all households. It will also be available and communicated through our usual channels such as Facebook and on Council's website. As noted in the report, the timetable for the remainder of the process is there. Staff will progress the draft annual plan to bring back to Council for adoption in June 2022. At this point, I'll hand over. Happy to take any questions or comments from councillors on this report.
Thank you, Jason. As we all know, this has received some media interest and some comments, quite a few comments actually in anti-social media, but that's how it is. We are in a position where we're in, where this work has been asked for, and we now need to discuss where to from here. Any comments or questions from councillors in regards to this report? Okay, Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's not really the report itself, but it just related to the situation. And given that with the valuation changes, the effects are going to be sort of felt by residential properties, I'm just wondering, we know the reasons for it, and we know that trying to tinker with it doesn't work. I'm just wondering if it's, given that this is an issue right up and down the country with the inflation at the moment, if it's worth lobbying government for some lifting of the thresholds for the government rates rebate subsidy scheme. It's just a thought.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Ford.
Yep, thanks, Gary. It's just a comment that it's important to note that during our submissions, so many people were supporting to get this work done. So I think it's equally as important that we carry on the way we've planned it. And as Paul said, no point tinkering with it. Carry on. So for me, support that.
Thank you. Councillor Fraser.
Just following on from Paul's comment around the change in GVs, I think it's really important that we communicate that incredibly well, because there's going to be quite significant differences depending on where you are. And so we need to make sure that we've, so that is a significant difference for some. So while we're not consulting on it, I think we need to be really clear with our information going out there, and know that it's going to create quite a lot of pain points for a lot of people. Yeah.
I appreciate that, and there are pain points in all walks of life at the moment in regards to the financial side of things. And this Councillor Duffy's raised a point that I mentioned to the media, but they failed to mention it, is that this is going to be a tough on everybody with everything, including those that want to build a house at 30 to 40% more than it was this time last year. Councillor Kramer.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Just going on from Councillor Fraser's comment about the communication, I think that is the most important part of what we need to do. There is misinformation within our communities, and we're sort of getting a bit of a backlash as to the property valuations that have been taken recently. And it seems to be landed on our doorstep when in fact it was an independent organisation that actually carried out that function. So I think it's important that that message is clearly explained to our communities. And also Bruce, Councillor Ford, clearly indicated also that during the long-term plan consultation process, there was a significant amount of support to ensure that council undertakes some of these projects that we've clearly identified need to be undertaken. So once again, it's how we articulate that information to our communities. And it can't be, in my view, just one source of communication. It seems that we are reliant on Facebook, the council's Facebook, to communicate with our residents. It doesn't always work. There's a lot of people that do not participate in Facebook for certain personal reasons. And they don't get these messages. They don't get the understanding of what's going on. We need to think about how we do our communications a lot better within our communities. Local community papers, local rags that they use, better advertising our Southland Times. Talking to somebody the other day and said, look, yeah, there's something in our Otago Daily Times about Southland District Council. There's nothing in the Southland Times. So we need to think about how we increase the better communication within our district so that people do have the opportunity to have a better understanding. Because at the moment, I think that's an area that we're lacking on significantly.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Keast, Councillor Byers.
Thank you, Worship. When in the last couple of years, we've made big effort about getting people to talk to us if they have trouble with their paying their rates or they're concerned about it. And yeah, I trust that our communications will carry that forward and that we are au fait with all the options that people might have, including, any help that they can get from MSD for, supplementary income, supplementary support for paying their rates when they live in their own home, depending on their income. So I hope that we've refreshed all that information and promoting it to those that are going to struggle.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Byers, Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to comment, really, early in this triennium, we had the long-term plan, and I think from what I gather, that is the time for the council to look at adjusting the levels of service and making some change in direction. We heard from people who, yes, they do want the roads to be maintained, but there was also a request, as I understood it, for the level of costs or spending that this council was undertaking to be managed or reduced. And people were saying, or a lot of people were saying, that they can't handle these big rate rises, 8% on top of 8% on top of 8%. So there does seem to be a requirement or a need for the council to adjust its level of spending at some point, and it's not happening yet. And I appreciate it's part of this bigger trend of centralisation, and we're caught up in that. But yeah, I think there is certainly a need to look at the way that we're spending money. And I will just throw in there again that this borrowing strategy to invest in the share market is not a positive one. I don't think councillors have talked to their community about this one. Yeah, so that's my 2 cents at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Byers. And the level of services, if you want to get feedback from people, you lower the level of service. That's when you hear it. And we know, especially from our latest Waka Kotahi audit, that if you do start lowering levels of service, then you get a bad audit. So it's a no-win whichever way you go. But we have heard from our ratepayers, as you say, through the long-term plan, and that's why we're at where we're at now. Councillor Owen, Councillor Scott.
Thank you. I'd just like to support Councillor Duffy's suggestion that we look to lobby the government or through LGNZ or something with regards to that rates rebate, because the people, from my recollection of the people who submitted as part of the LTP who were struggling with who want things to be cut back, those who are struggling to pay the rates. And I think we really need to take on a bit of a strong advocacy position for them. There's certainly not going to be just down here that it's an issue. So any work that we can do on that issue is going to help people around the country if we can get the government to look at that issue. So, and hopefully with some expedience, given the current situation, potentially they might be able to put a higher priority on it. So.
I appreciate that, Councillor. And I know there was even something addressed to the Prime Minister a few days ago on the news in regards to the price of vegetables. So this is across the board, as I say. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I certainly support Councillor Duffy and Councillor Owen's comments around the advocacy as well. But in relation to advocacy too, I think there's one really important avenue that we can use, and that's the Wakakatahi far rate advocacy, because I mean that makes up a huge percentage of our story around the long-term plan, and the huge cost and the huge importance of our roading network, not just for Southland but for the whole country. And I think we need to be banging on their door and getting that fare rate increased so that we can carry on the important work that we're doing without the ratepayers effectively almost paying twice for the roads. So I think that's really important too.
I appreciate that comment, Councillor. Councillor Kramer, Councillor Douglas.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just what I was saying earlier on, I think it's also useful that we advise our residents of how council can help as well. If there's any ability to defer paying rates and what schemes there may be available to assist the ratepayers. I mean, we've got people in the area that I live absolutely struggling with the tourism, as you know, and to have this sort of increase on top of what they're struggling with at the moment is certainly not going to be easy for them. So we need to think about how we can provide some assistance to them. And I think it's important how that's articulated to them. We do have to carry on with doing what we need to do. But, you know, the world has changed significantly when we went out with our LTP. And the borders were closed for a lot longer than what we had anticipated. We've now got some real activity over in Russia, and that's having an impact on our fuel costs, our grocery bills. I think I read the other day an average increase of for our households about $150 to $180 a week. So all those things are having a significant impact on people's ability to survive, basically. So we have to take recognition that things have changed significantly since we went out and consulted with our LTP. But anyway, I'm just saying, let's see how we can, what avenues are available for business people and residents on how we can assist. I think that needs to be explained.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas, Councillor Menzies.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just following on from the other speakers and the theme that's coming through. And yeah, I would just like us as an organisation to look internally at how effective and efficient we are operating our own in our own patch. We've been through, 2 years of huge turmoil, and perhaps that has shifted our focus. But now that I'm not necessarily saying we're coming out of the crisis, but now that we've got a chance to pause and look at ourselves, I noticed in the Deloitte's report that they considered efficiency and effectiveness, but they just paid it lip service. They didn't go into it in any detail. And I was wondering, is it time for us as an organisation to do some navel gazing and look internally at our processes and just consider how efficient and effective we truly are.
Thank you. I know the leadership team are doing that daily, especially daily at the moment, that's for sure. Councillor Menzies, Councillor Byers, Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just in relation to Councillor Douglas's comments, it's probably important we communicate to our ratepayers how we are looking at ourselves and what the outcome of that discussion might be. So it's good to hear that's happening on an ongoing basis, but it's also being accountable back to our ratepayers, isn't it? But what I wanted to talk about was just about letting again our ratepayers know when we might have a return to our offices opening. For many people, when they want to discuss what's happening, they want to do it face to face, particularly when relating that back to the affordability to be able to pay their rates and what other options might be for many of our ratepayers. They don't do that easily online or on the phone. So just having a clear plan ahead would be good to let people know when our offices are open again for business, in addition to being able to pay their rates at that time.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Byers, Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Supporting Councillor Douglas on the spending, local spending. Well, how we spend our money, and I know we've talked about it a bit, supporting local businesses, and it's not really happened to a great degree yet. I just think there's a lot more room for the council to divert spending back into the community. And also about the roads, major expense to this council on the roads. And I note that the Mayor is now supporting a slowdown or a speed reduction across the roads. And I think in light of perhaps the central government signalling that that's what they want. And that is going to help us with regard to how long our roads last. And of course, there's other benefits to that as well, with less people dying on the roads, less fuel consumption, and so on. So I wonder if there's ways that, I know it's politically difficult to encourage people to slow down, but that seems like a good way. If that's going to reduce the spend on the roads, say ripping them up so much, then that could be worth pursuing as well.
Appreciate those comments. Thank you. Councillor Scott, Councillor Harper.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Just following on from Councillor Kramer's comments, I think, irrespective of the necessity of this mammoth workload that we're doing, I think it almost does feel like we're kicking our ratepayers when they're down. And it's just, I think it's really important that we are working as efficiently as possible. And just a question, I sat in on the Finance and Assurance meeting yesterday, and there's some talks about some of the savings that we've made over the last year due to COVID, and some of those expenses sort of coming back into that ops reserve, which has a balance of, I think, around 800K. Is there any sort of movement in there to pass some of those savings on to the ratepayers, any sort of material amount of money that we could offset, or has that kind of already been taken into account?
I can't answer you on that one. We only discussed that yesterday, so it's certainly a path. It's a little under 2% of the rate take, but yeah, it's certainly something that can be discussed. Councillor Scott. Councillor Harper.
Yes, Your Worship. I'd just like to follow up a wee bit on Councillor Douglas's comments there, and a certain extent Councillor Byers. It is critically important that we have a look at the efficiencies in our local communities. Local work can always be done cheaper than the big broad wide world can offer us. Councillor Kramer made a comment there a couple of meetings ago about some of the things that the community boards and stuff can do and can't do, and how they're restrained by health and safety and God knows what else. So yeah, I'd just like to push that barrel along a wee bit and give the community boards a bit more flexibility in what they can do and what they can't do. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's feeding money back into the community, but it's not feeding money into ratepayers' pockets, which is what we're here at the moment to discuss. But I do get that picture. Don't get me wrong. Okay, are there any other comments or questions in regards to this report? If not, oh, sorry, Councillor Byers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on that, George's comments there and your response, I think that by supporting local, this council supporting local, it does actually feed money back to the ratepayers. It's like the example that you gave around the bike trail up in Lumsden and Mosburn, the effect that that's having on the local businesses. And if this council was to focus quite strongly on supporting local, then that would have a really big benefit on the ratepayers of the district.
Sorry, what I meant there, Councillor Byers, was that it doesn't probably get all the way back to those that actually are the ones we hear from that are suffering, i.e. the comments that were made by the elderly network that came through the other day in the media is where I was getting at there, Councillor Byers. Okay,
well, I think there would be advantages to them as well.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions in regards to this report? If not, you have the recommendations A through to G. I'm happy to move those recommendations and focus on the bottom one in regards to that staff communicate this information through the first edition, and I pick up that those comments need to be quite deep, so there could be quite a few pages used in providing that information, which would be relevant. I'm happy to move those recommendations. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Ford. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. That was a very good discussion, and thank you to staff and management for bringing this matter forward.
Thanks for that feedback.
Thank you, Jason. The next item on the agenda is the item 7.3, the fund manager appointment process.
Good morning, Your Worship, councillors. It's my pleasure to present the fund manager appointment process to you today. Now, this report actually, as you heard earlier, has gone to the Finance and Assurance Committee yesterday. It had a good discussion through it. The recommendations, as noted in this report, were agreed to, but there was one dissenting vote, as you heard previously, and that was just in regards to the whole process of us investing our reserve funds. So if I just briefly take you through what this report is talking about, I'm not going to go into too much detail about how the shortlisted candidates, that's in there, and it was also subject to the workshop, but I'll just take you through what we sort of talked about yesterday. So it's really important to note that Council's investment policy notes how investments are going to be managed, and we did that as part of that long-term plan process. And at the time, Council took the view that it wanted to have really low risk for its working capital and restricted funds. So those monies that we needed on a day-to-day basis, or those monies we were holding in trust for others, it was really, really important that we didn't project them into any risky perhaps returns that might take the value of those down. But we did note that in regards to our general reserves, which do have more of a medium to long-term view, so those reserves have existed for some time and we're constantly using and replenishing on the whole, that those actually were able to get a better return, a more moderate risk, and looking at a balanced fund. Recognising, of course, that, in today's world, there is potential for there to be negative returns, but on the whole, over the longer period, that those returns would probably be somewhere after fees sitting between 4.4 and probably 6%. Okay. So to help with the approach that Council asked us to undertake, we have asked PwC to assist in appointing that fund manager. And so they've come along to us and they've talked about how they've used good practice to actually select some shortlisted funds for Council's consideration. Okay, so those 6 funds are itemised in the report and the resolution, and that's Milford, ANZ, ASB, Westpac and Quay Street. And all of those are balanced funds, which have typically equal amounts in both income and growth. Now, what has been proposed is that, as part of the resolutions, is that Council suggests that PwC send out the request for proposals to all 6 of those. And then they go through a process of recommending the 4 top managers. To do that, what happens is it's a 2-step process. They send out a questionnaire of about 100 questions, and the fund managers come back with answers to those questionnaires. They then evaluate the answers in regards to a evaluation criteria, which they've noted on page 46 in summary, and that they put some weightings against that. So yesterday at the Finance and Assurance Committee, they considered those weightings against each of those categories, and they agreed that they were appropriate. What's then suggested is once they've shortlisted it to 4, that they actually come back and present to the Finance and Assurance Committee at its next meeting. And then the Finance and Assurance Committee consider both the recommendation from PwC and also the discussions that they've had with the providers to then provide a recommendation to Council for adoption, because this is this isn't a delegated authority to the Finance and Assurance Committee. It is Council that must appoint the fund manager, and it's also Council who must decide on the amount of funds that are going to be invested. So that's just a brief summary of what's happened to date.
Appreciate that summary, and yes, it's we're in the process, has been explained, as to identifying 4 fund managers, and then they will come and present, and that will be the time that certain questions can be asked around probably matters that were brought up yesterday. Any comments or questions in regards to this matter? Councillor Harper, Councillor Byers.
Yes, Your Honour, through you. And is there no fund managers actually New Zealand based that are capable of doing this sort of work? Like
Milford is New Zealand.
Milford's New Zealand based.
Yeah.
What about Quay Street? Who are they?
I'm not too sure on that. I'd have to find out and come back to you with more information.
Yeah. No, it just sort of emphasises the lack of financial, not financial returns that we've got for investing in New Zealand for New Zealand people, isn't it?
I think there's 2 points though to that. I mean, often the fund managers may be Australasian in nature, but sometimes it's one of the questions you may wish to ask them is how much of their funds are invested in New Zealand.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's what I'm meaning by some questions you may want to raise. Well, that the time to do that when we were sitting down with the 4 fund managers that have been identified through the evaluation process.
Yeah.
Councillor Byers, I could probably hear what you're going to say, but I might cut you short.
Oh, you can't cut me short, surely. Yeah, look, I've got a lot of respect for the work that's been done here, but I'm taking the other side of the debate, because Anne's mentioned that we're investing our reserve funds, but really there are no reserve funds because they've been spent. And that's why.
Yeah, Your Worship, I'd like to make a point of order, please.
Yep, Councillor.
The point of order is that is not what we are discussing today. We are discussing the report in front of us, which is the appointment of a fund manager, and it's the process that we're talking about. So I think
okay, well, we can talk about the process.
It's the process of the appointment. It's not the process of the issue that you're talking about. It's the issue is the appointment process.
And as you were reminded,
you're going down the track of you're going to borrow $40 million.
That's point of order.
Councillor Byers, the point of order has been raised, and this is a matter that you drew our attention to at the meeting yesterday, and the chairman quite rightly pulled you into order We are here to discuss the appointment or not of this process going forward. It's not to litigate matters that we've discussed before and that you've brought up before.
The Finance Committee is sending through some advice which is not actually that good.
Which you raised yesterday, Councillor Byers. So I am going to cut you short, as I did warn you at the start of this, because I did understand or know what you were going to bring up. So it's been discussed, and we are here to comment on the matter that's in front of us, and that is to agree that PwC evaluate the request for proposals and agree that the top 4 fund managers present at a future Finance and Assurance Committee meeting, which is then where you can raise your questions to.
All right. I have another question for you. At what meeting do we talk about how much funds we're going to borrow to invest in the share market? When do we talk about that?
So that will come up in a future meeting. I haven't quite yet worked out which meeting it'll come to, whether it'll come to the next one along with the fund manager appointment, or whether we'll delay it another meeting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Byers, for repeating your concerns. And as I say, you can ask those questions at that evaluation meeting.
Well, I have another question.
Yes.
Projected returns, of course, aren't any. There's no guarantees in there, and Anne's mentioned.
Once again, Your Worship, this is a point of order. That is not what this report is about.
Yep.
So I would ask that the meeting stays on track, Your Worship.
You just mentioned in the introduction 4.4 to 6% potential returns.
Once again,
I've got a question about that.
Yeah, it's a point of order here, Your Worship.
Councillor Byers, I don't mean to silence you in regards to this. Do you have any questions around the process that has been put forward by Anne and her team in regards to the request for proposal for this fund?
At what point is inflation factored into these equations?
That's when you can ask those questions. Do you have any concerns or any questions? Well, I know you have concerns, but do you have any questions around the process that are outlined in recommendations A through to F? If not, then I am going to put the matter to the council.
Well, I'd like to know how much we're going to borrow before we...
We haven't even appointed the fund managers yet, Councillor Byers. If we do or don't is when we can make those discussions. This is about appointing or not the fund managers. Okay. You have the recommendation in front of you, A through to F. Is there any further questions in regards to that? If not, I'll put the recommendation A through to F. I'm happy to move those recommendations. Is there a seconder?
Happy to second it, Your Worship.
The recommendations have been seconded by Councillor Kramer as they sit. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Thank.
Councillor Byers, do you wish to have your? Thank you, Fiona. Have you noted that?
So he's wanting his dissenting vote recorded.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, that has gone through. So thank you for that, and we look forward to speaking to the appointed 4 fund managers at a later Finance and Assurance meeting, where some of those questions raised by Councillor Harper and Councillor Byers can be raised, or any other questions that the committee have. And just a reminder that all councillors are welcome to those meetings. It's not restricted to those that are on it. Thank you. The next item on, and I'm just going to be keeping an eye on the time, because I know 3 councillors need to step out exactly at 10:30 to attend a meeting. So I'll be, if we're halfway through a matter, I'll be pulling it short or adjourning it. Next item on the agenda is the Coast Guard building, which is on a recreation reserve, or proposed. One is already on the land, and another proposed on the recreation reserve at Riverton. And who's going to be speaking to this? Nick, is it?
No, Teresa Cameron.
Teresa.
Good morning, Your Worship and councillors. The Riverton Coast Guard would like to build an additional building on the Taramia Bay Recreation Reserve. A Coast Guard doesn't fit within the Recreation Reserve status of the Reserves Act. So, but we can issue a lease under the public interest, which we believe is the case here. So historically, it's required the prior consent of the Minister of Conservation. In 2013, they delegated this prior consent to council. So our report is seeking council's prior consent as delegate of the minister for staff to issue a lease for an activity that is under the public interest on a recreation reserve. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I did note it must be an old application forms because it still said something about community development subcommittees on there somewhere, but that's okay. I know a little bit about this and I really appreciate the work that's gone into this, and we're here to decide as per the recommendations. I don't know, Councillor Owen, do you want to pass any comment in regards to this matter? I'm sure it's been on your mind.
So the community board were all very supportive of the activities of the Coast Guard and didn't see them at any point moving to another site or anything. So so they were all supportive. My only thought is that I don't think we've heard anything from the Runaka yet around that, and so I just wanted to make sure that that happens, that consultation happens before anything further happens. So.
No, appreciate that. Any comments or questions from councillors in regards to this matter? And just noting that this is to secure the lease, they still need the Coast Guard still need to go through the resource management matters and the building code stuff. So I'm guessing that'll be a time when members of the public have got a right to speak up as well, Councillor Owen. So that's all good. And Teresa, can you just pick up on that point that we need to make that communication with the Runaka just to hear back from them?
Yes, I've already been in consultation with them. I've yet to receive a reply, but we have got written approval from Ngāi Tahu, or written support, I should say. Thank you. I don't know where Councillor Byers has gone, but I don't know if there's any comments there. So I'm happy to move the recommendation A through to D, that we move along the lines of supporting the granting of a lease, and of course the other procedures will happen in due course. Is there a seconder?
I'm happy to second it.
Sorry, Councillor Scott. I saw Councillor Scott's hand go up. All those in favour?
Aye.
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 Against? Carried. Thank you, Teresa. I'm looking forward to progress on that matter.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the Curio Bay Wastewater Treatment Plant matter.
Good morning, Your Worship and councillors. I'm here to discuss the funding approach of the Curio Bay Wastewater Treatment Plant. The report has been included in the agenda and I'll take it as being read. The purpose of this report is to consider whether the future costs related to the Curio Bay Wastewater Treatment Plant should now be predominantly funded as part of the district-wide targeted wastewater rate. The Curio Bay Wastewater Treatment Plant was upgraded in 2016 to service the Curio Bay Recreation Reserve, with council resolving to fund the cost of the upgrade and the annual operating costs following contributions from third parties from the general rate. The report at the time noted that the funding of the facility would transfer across to the community wastewater scheme if and when agreement was reached to connect in the Porpoise Bay subdivision and the wider community. It indicated that when this point was reached, all properties connected would then be subject to the district-funded wastewater rate, with the reserve activity reverting to a per PAM basis. In 2018, the Porpoise Bay subdivision was completed. As part of the consent conditions and a separate agreement reached with the developer, the subdivision was connected to the Curio Bay Wastewater Treatment Plant. As such, staff are now requesting council to confirm that the scheme be treated as a community wastewater scheme as part of the wastewater activity in the 22-23 annual plan. This will involve changing the way the scheme's future operating and capital costs are funded from 22-23 onwards, with the majority of the funding coming from the wastewater rate, in line with how other community wastewater schemes are funded. The impact on rates will be a net increase for properties currently paying the wastewater rate, full charge of $4.95 and half charge 70 cents, with a rates decrease of $3.55 by the general rate for all other properties. It will also require an extension to the targeted wastewater rating boundary to be included in the annual plan 22-23 funding impact statement. An updated interim funding agreement will also need to be developed to revise the annual funding contribution from DOC and the South Catlins Charitable Trust. Staff are also recommending that the existing loan repayments related to the original upgrade costs continue to be funded from the general rate. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Leslie. Got a question from Councillor Duffy.
Yes, Your Worship. I just need to declare an interest through my role as chair of the South Catlins Charitable Trust.
Okay, that wasn't declared at the start, so
I missed the start. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, got us gold. Yeah, sorry, you were late. Yeah, okay. You noted that, committee advisor Fiona.
Got that.
All right. Are there any questions in regards to this matter? I know we've discussed it at previous meetings. Councillor Owen, Councillor Duffy, you want to take your hand down, please? Councillor Duffy, Councillor Owen.
I'm trying.
Thank you. I don't know much about the specific area, and so I just wondered, because there's been no recent community consultation, the ratepayers who will be affected with the increase, is it all the subdivisions are being sold off and it's multiple separate ones that are going to have the increase to 455, or is it one subdivision or developer who owns 10 properties and is now going to have 10 times that increase all of a sudden in a few months' time? It's just what I'm curious about.
There's an increase to every ratepayer of $4.95 that has a sewage connection. The properties in the Porpoise Bay subdivision will now be paying that wastewater rate, and that was part of the resource consent. So the subdivider had sort of consulted on behalf of the people buying the sections effectively by being issued the resource consent to connect with the wastewater treatment plant.
Councillor Owen, so those owners now own those properties, so it's not owned, they're not owned in one lot by the subdivider.
Okay.
I believe most of them have been purchased now.
Okay, and we would hope that whoever sold those properties passed on that information to those people who bought it, that's going to be coming in the future, because it was a long time ago that those agreements were made. So yeah, we'd hope that someone gets surprised jump in their rates.
My understanding is that they were aware of it when they buy beware type situation, Councillor. Okay, you have the recommendations. I'm happy to move the recommend. Oh, sorry, Councillor Keast.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just touching on that, I'm sure that as far as the ratepayers that are now connected to that system are concerned, that will be a very minimal cost on the basis of them having their wastewater disposed of, as opposed to someone who has to build and maintain their own. So they've got a real advantage there. I see that this is a good thing for the area, and so I am happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Keast. Is there a seconder? Councillor Owen, a seconder. All those in favour?
Aye. Aye.
Against? Carried. I know it's a lot in the recommendations, but yeah, as you have pointed out, Councillor Keast, it's for the benefit not only for the users but for the environment. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a forecasted financial position on page 159.
Good morning, Sheree here. So I'm here this morning to present the forecast financial position for the year ending 30th of June 22. The purpose of this report is to inform the expected year-end financial result compared to what was planned for year one in the published 21-31 long-term plan, and to seek Council's approval for the resulting forecasted position. As you'll hopefully have noted, I'll take this report as read, there is a number of unbudgeted expenditure requests as well as deletion, deferral and bringing forward of a number of capital projects. This report was considered by the Finance and Assurance Committee at its meeting yesterday, and the recommendations included were as they stand effectively in this report, and the recommendation was passed for Council to consider adoption of these recommendations. To give some background to date, this has been quite an extensive process whereby the activity managers commenced the process of forecasting by looking through their actual results, their committed contracts and their work programs to establish where they anticipate they would be at the 30th of June 2022. I and the finance team have had the fantastic job of consolidating some 600 and something odd forecast changes into the document that you see in front of you today. And I do appreciate it's quite an extensive document and quite a lot of detailed information included in here. So I just wanted to touch base on a couple of the key points in this document, and then I'm open for any questions that you may have.
So we're
So the
referring to the, sorry, we're referring to the document that was emailed out now, aren't we? Not the one that's on the agenda.
Yes. So just knowing there was a couple of changes in relation to the recommendations that was emailed out yesterday, and also on Friday an amended version of attached B, the balance sheet, was all circulated. So I'll speak a little bit more when we consider those recommendations about the rationale for those changes. The majority of the significant forecasting changes relate to our capital works program. Our capital expenditure is proposed to decrease through this forecasting process by $6 million. And this is predominantly due to projects which are proposed to be deferred to a later year or deleted from the work program. We also have a few instances where we've got budget savings on completed projects. In relation to our operational expenditure, through forecasting, this is proposed to increase by $0.7 million, and it relates to costs associated with resource consent applications, urgent reaction, HM recruitment.
We're losing there, Cherie. Well, I am. I don't know if anyone else is.
Got with on technology, which is probably inhibiting the connection. Apologies.
Got you good there now.
Awesome. In relation to operational expenditure, our activity managers have also revisited the new contracts that have been put in place, predominantly around those Section 17A reviews, and updated the budgets to reflect what those contracts are outlining, and that's specifically around mowing, litter bins and gardening. Our revenue is also forecast to increase by $1.8 million through this forecasting round, and that's predominantly around grant funding for the Te Anau Wastewater project and increased forestry harvesting and resource consent income. Sorry. I just wanted to speak briefly to each of the attachments that were included to this report. Attachment A shows effectively our profit and loss statement as a result of those forecasted changes. You will see that the net position is an increase of 1.1 million through forecasting, with the overall change being moving from a deficit, as we had planned in the long-term plan, to a surplus of $4.4 million. And that is an amalgamation of both our carry forward adjustments as well as approved unbudgeted expenditure. Attachment B shows our balance sheet forecasted for the year ending 30th of June. As I alluded to earlier, a calculated on Friday, and basically through our processes of doing our checks and incorporating into the 22-23 annual plan, we identified some toilet projects that were to be funded via loans rather than reserves. So attachment B effectively is a reclassification of $514,000 between loans and reserves. Attachment C provides expenditure up to 49,999 for approval. Attachment D provides details of significant unbudgeted expenditure over $50,000. So typically you might see individual reports for these, but for efficiency perspective, we've incorporated these into the content of this report. Attachment E provides details of the planning to be deferred to future years. Attachment F provides the specific projects which we are proposing to delete. G includes any projects that we are planning to bring forward for from future years. Attachment H is quite a comprehensive detailed list that looks at both revenue operating expenditure and capital expenditure on a business unit basis, with some commentary provided from the budget managers. Finally, attachment I relates to the delegation that the Chief Executive has authority to approve any unbudgeted expenditure under $10,000. This equates to a total of $34,000, which Mr. McIntosh has approved prior to this meeting. One point that was brought up yesterday in the Finance and Assurance meeting was around often our forecasting does include what we call negative adjustments. So we don't have any with these, but just to bring to your attention, paragraph 19 gives some details on $1.9 million worth of negative adjustments that we're capturing through this forecasting process. Just wanting to point out that community boards, we have endeavoured to make sure that they are aware of any changes to their local budgets and their movements in their projects through this forecasting process. I just wanted to bring to your attention some of the key changes that effectively, I guess the key issues in this forecasting process. The most significant, as I've alluded to, is around the impact of forecasting our works program and what that has. If you refer to page 170, paragraph 41 and 42, are summary tables which outline our capital works program and the movement. So in the LTP for our non-roading works, we were anticipating $28.9 million worth of project works. Adding to this, we've put carry forwards through of 3.4 million and also unbudgeted expenditure of 2.4 million. This equates to a total project of $8 million for the year. Forecasting, as I've alluded to, we're going to remove $6 million from that, bringing us back to a number which is not too dissimilar from where we originally started at $28.8 million. The second table, which relates to roading, you will note there's only been minor forecasting movements, predominantly relating to footpaths and the changes in the Waka Katohi. I think it's really important that we note the work program includes a number of projects which are planned to occur over multiple years, and the allocation across the years is indicative only. The components of the project, such as design, consent, and physical construction, when we do the budget, effectively, we anticipate when these will occur, but often these are contributing factors or delays. One point to note is that it is really important, and we've got an ongoing issue whereby carrying forward and adding unbudgeted projects makes the delivery of our works program difficult and makes it the ability for council to successfully achieve its projects a bit more difficult. This is both a historic which management and governors need to continue to focus on to improve going forward. Management believe that the 21-22 forecasted work program is on track to be delivered. However, they still recognise that there's a risk of further market resource shortages and supply delays, which could affect the final program. In the Finance and Assurance discussion yesterday, Chairman attention, I guess, the importance of the benchmark included on paragraph 38 and 39 of this report, and that basically looks at the level of capital works that we're doing in comparison to our depreciation. So the legislation requires that we do 100%. After these forecasted changes, we're looking to sit at around about 159%. So yeah, that we are still, although we are removing a significant amount of projects, we are still looking to be completing more than what we originally had planned. One further point to note too is around those significant unbudgeted expenditure I mentioned earlier. Attachment D outlines 6 items totaling 0.7 million, which are unbudgeted items greater than 50,000. All except one of these items relates to capital maintenance expenditure for water and sewage. So we've got unplanned maintenance for water of 200,000 and sewage of 50,000, and these are effectively derived as a result of our ageing network and the ongoing plans to improve those through our capital program. Also noted is the market conditions and the increased contract prices for the UV unit and materials for construction of both Riverton and water and Ojai wastewater upgrades, equating to 120,000 and 150,000 respectively. I guess the point to note there is that when these budgets were originally set, it was in the development of 2020, and we're all aware how times have changed since that point in time. Additionally, we've allowed forecasting for $61,000 of minor capital works, predominantly around sewage pump replacements. And historically, we haven't had a minor works budget for those. The remaining unbudgeted expenditure item relates to an increase in consultants' costs for the resource and complexity of the consents applications that we're receiving has been increasing. And we've also received a significant and complex consent application where council is the landowner. So we're required to have an external consultant for an independent perspective on this matter. The majority of the increase in these consultants are anticipated to be additional consenting revenue, as I alluded to earlier. However, there is a shortfall of $101,000, which is proposed through this forecasting to be funded from the District Operations Reserve. As a point to note, after the forecasting changes, the anticipated balance of this District Operations Reserve is 0.8 million, anticipated to be $0.8 million. One question that Councillor Kramer always raises, and we had some discussion about it yesterday, was the impact of these changes on our rates. So our rates have already been set for the 21-22 financial year in July 2021, and therefore there's no impact on the current year's rates. However, where we potentially over-collect, this will increase our reserves. However, one of the main contributors to our future rates is the movement in our loans as a result of the deferral of the capital works. So as we are anticipating a decrease in our loans from February forecasting, the resultant impact is a reduction in our loans in the 22-23 years. This equates to $307,000, which the rate impact, as we use an average, is roughly about 50% of this. And Sheree, I guess
Sheree, sorry, can I cut you off? We've got to, we're going to lose 3 councillors in about 30 seconds. That's quite a bit for us to ponder over, having a cup of tea and coffee, and then we'll carry on and say, Councillor Duffy, do you want 10 minutes? I understand.
Thank you, Your Worship. The meeting's been allowed for half an hour. I don't think it'll take that long. Well, you tell me what you want me to do when it's completed.
Mr. Mayor, you could carry on doing this. The others could wait. It is time dependent, but the officer knows that we've got the council meeting going on.
Okay, I would prefer for the 3 councillors to be here through this discussion, that's all. Okay, sorry, Sheree, carry on, and then we'll take a break and those 3 councillors can head off.
Thank you. I'll endeavour not to talk too much longer.
No, it's very good. It's very good. Don't get me wrong.
The point I just wanted to make there effectively is having considered this morning the 22-23 annual plan is that in order to achieve the best possible result in relation to the financials, as we have actually incorporated these forecasted changes into that draft annual plan numbers, and so that reduction in the loan repayments has been incorporated into that, as well as the various significant capital works. The only other point I just wanted to make was, and I guess I'm admitting an oversight on my part, was through council reports to this point in date, and even the discussion this morning around our investment and borrowing strategy, you will note that in our long-term plan, we anticipated that both our interest and our sources. I didn't actually, unfortunately, forecast to change this. As I said yesterday to the Finance Insurance Committee, I was focused on making sure everyone else was doing everything correctly, and forgot to do my own. But effectively, where we're sitting at with that is that, given that we haven't progressed down the path of fully that investment and borrowing strategy, our interest income revenue will predominantly be from internal sources rather than external sources this year. And so I will look to revisit that and include some commentary in a future monthly financial report, just to give a status update. Other than that, I hope I've covered all the key points, but I'm happy to take any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you, Cherie. Certainly a very, very good commentary, and my apologies, I couldn't stay around yesterday to hear the questions, but I understand there were a couple, and we'll start with Councillor Ford.
Yep, thank you very much, Gary. These discussions are very important to us all, and Cherie's comms are breaking badly, so IT needs to do something about that. Not good enough to have bad comms, so I would ask that they see to that, please.
Thank you, Councillor Menzies.
Thank you, Worship. I'm sure this was discussed yesterday, and it seems like the minutiae of this discussion. And my question, I guess I'm just wanting to highlight, is this around increases in prices that we hear about so often due to COVID and other things. And normally we wouldn't get to look at the detail of this costing. So I just want to ask a question. It's just on page 180, and it's just around the toilets of Clifton. It talks about additional budget required to replace hinges with stronger ones on 3 doors at $15,000. One could just about build a toilet for that, one would have thought, but why are those costs so astronomical, given my lack of knowledge and expertise in this area?
Through you, Your Worship, my understanding is that they are, given the nature of the toilets and that they're public facilities, I'm not quite sure if it is this one or one of the other ones. Some of them are automatic doors, and also just of utilisation and vandalism and that sort of thing. They are an extensively heavy duty hinge that is used. I'm not sure whether one of the GMs wish to add any further comment in relation to that.
Nick's got his hand up. I'm pretty sure I know what his answer is going to be.
Through you, Your Worship. That toilet relates to one that was getting a lot of wind damage, and they are big steel doors. So not only did we replace the hinges, we also put stronger closers on it to prevent that damage. So yes, it is a reasonable cost, but the cost of damage was outweighing what we actually need to do to repair that toilet block. Something we'll definitely make sure goes in from day one in future installs.
Thank you, and I guess that applies to Winton also. So my next question following on from that is, when looking at putting in toilets, for example, the maintenance costs that are associated with that in the future may mean another option might be better if unaware of what those costs might be ahead. But yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you. Any other questions in regards to this matter? I know there's a lot of information to take in there, and you have the recommendations. So if there are no further questions, I'll happy to put those recommendations for a councillor too. I'm happy to move the recommendations. Is there a seconder?
I've got a few little amendments to them just to reflect the.
So they're the amendments that were sent out in the email yesterday, Fiona, is that the ones you refer? Yes. So is everyone aware, Councillor Crame, you're aware of what you're seconding, that's in regards to those? Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
And just to add some context, those amendments were based on a recommendation from the finance just around actually understanding the total impact of each of those resolutions on unbudgeted expenditure and deferrals or movements in capital works.
Yeah, and thank you for including those, Sheree. Okay, I'll put it then. Everyone who's in favour of this matter, all right.
Aye.
Against? Don't appear to be anyone against. It's carried. Thank you very much for that, Sheree. Mr. Chief Executive, I think before we move into your management report, we'll take this break and allow no pressure, Councillor Duffy, but 20 minutes will be sufficient for your meeting. He might have gone already, is he? Okay, how about looking at the clock? How about we come back at 11 a.m. To go through the final 3 matters on the agenda, and hopefully that will give the licensing team time to discuss the issue they need to. Thank you. We'll see you all back at 11. Councillor Douglas, can you just pass that on? We'll be coming back in at 11, and I would really like Councillor Duffy at the last item on the agenda.
And your wish, I have to leave at about 11:15.
Okay. Noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bruce. I just tried to ring you.
Oh yeah, my phone was on silent. And
No worries. I'm quite happy to talk. Just give you a quick heads up. I've got a meeting on Friday with Crown Infrastructure.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Yep.
I'll fill you in on that.
Yep, no, good as God. I hadn't seen anything for a week, so I
Excuse me,
thought
Mr. Mayor, while the recording's paused, but the sign has got SDC council meeting, that is still going out on.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with that.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that advisory. I'm sure Councillor Ford's not going to say anything too derogatory.
We'll just keep it quiet. Right, let Councillors Duffy and Harper back in.
Oh, so they've finished. That's great.
Yep.
And Councillor Douglas too, isn't it?
Yeah. And then he's going at 11:15.
Yeah, which is news to me, but that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm back now. Sorry about the delay.
No, you're all good. We've still got a minute.
Okay. Thanks.
No, thank you. All right.
Right. When you want to start again, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. Okay, thanks everyone for that break, and we'll move directly into the Chief Executive's Management Report on page 197. Mr. Chief Executive, are you there?
I am indeed. Thank you, Your
Awesome.
Worship.
Thank you.
Welcome back, councillors. It gives me great pleasure to present this report. It's at the end of March already, and it's extraordinary that so much has happened in such a difficult period. And what council has received and approved in the last this meeting and yesterday's, and in the meeting since Christmas, is actually just shows how much work is still going on. And I'd just like to start by just expressing a vote of thanks for the team and all their efforts. I'll touch back on that in a moment, but it's remarkable to me how much is actually still being done while everyone's working remotely. And so just firstly, the future for local government, as the councillors will be aware, this report that I'm speaking to also forms the basis for updating the community boards. And so I have put a little bit of a discussion in here about the working with the panel for the future for local government. I think that was an extremely good session with the panel last week, and it's worth noting that we expect to see the second stage report from the panel with their thoughts about the future for local government. It's actually at the moment scheduled to land before the local body elections, but we understand that it in fact might be just after that, which would be probably better. On the subject of COVID-19, which I've I guess alluded to already, very welcome to see the relaxation of the border restrictions being announced recently, and that's particularly welcome news for the particularly hard hit areas which really do benefit from the international visitor. It was very nice to see earlier that we did have a reasonable level of local visitation in the interim, but it'll be very, very good to, particularly around Te Anau Milford, to see those international visitors return. Also very good to see the Kickstart funding being announced, and while the announcement for that did highlight particularly Fiordland again, I did check and confirm that that is also eligible for businesses on the south coast as well. So that's certainly welcome news. At the moment, we are still waiting to see what the situation is with the Omicron outbreak peak for Southland. It's a bit hard to figure out what happens over the weekend because the reporting goes all seems to drop off. But we're certainly hopeful that it's not too far away. The incident management team, who have been helping us steer our way through all of this, looking as soon as we can to go back to face-to-face meetings. But again, we'll be doing that on the basis that as soon as it is safe. But we would just like to acknowledge that the precautions that we took as an organisation from the start of this outbreak have worked. And we've actually got a very low level of infection for affecting staff. And as to the best of my knowledge, we have no transmission through work. The transmission and the infection rate has actually come about through other sources, and obviously particularly around the schools for those families with school kids. Well, look, we've got a quick update in the report about water and waste, which again has been having a fairly high focus. There has been some acknowledgement here of taste and odour problems for some residents of Riverton. Unfortunately, we do seem to get this in low flow times of year and in this dry weather. And certainly also want to just touch on, with the extended dry, the number of households that are running out of water, and those that are on tank supply. And of course the irony is tank supply only works if you've got good continuous rainfall. So we often have conversations around how we could take the pressure off our community suppliers by all putting in private water tanks, but as we're discovering, sometimes reticulated supply actually does provide a more secure and in the long run safer option. There's an update on some of the progress around the stimulus funding. Again, very heartening to see how much of that is on track, and just noting again that work was put on top of in a really reasonably big program that we were looking at. We've touched on the project delivery team, still going reasonably well in terms of recruitment and some quite big and challenging projects that they are delivering. Community facilities. Earlier on in the meeting, there have been a few acknowledgements that would be highly desirable if we could get more work back out to the local communities, and we're certainly struggling at the moment to get that work actually out. We don't seem to have a lot of uptake, and I think that is a reflection on low staffing numbers and all the other challenges that have been put on all the business community right across the country. We're not very nice to hear the update around the mountain cycle trail this morning. And just like to jump back to acknowledge and it's an upcoming report, but we're moving very quickly into the preparation for local body elections. And there's a bit, as councillors, more long-serving councillors will know, there's a bit of process that we have to do around that, and some decisions coming up shortly. I'd like to quickly finish on building consents. Yesterday at the Finance and Assurance, there was an update on the external audit on the BCA. Very good result. I've touched base with them this morning. They tell me 50% up again this month compared to last year in terms of consent applications. At the moment, they are just hanging in there. They had a tiny bit of COVID in the group, but they're still at the moment doing very well and meeting. So, Mr. Mayor, I'll just finish there. Any questions, as ever, please direct them to the leadership team.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the team? Councillor Scott, Councillor Byers.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, Cameron. Just around that community facilities that you're talking about, and like I know was discussed a bit earlier on as well, but look, I know those drop-in sessions were really well received by the contractors, and I thought that was a good idea. But I do wonder whether the lack of uptake from some of those smaller jobs, I think they're due to two things. One, the amount of potential red tape and process around and the workload perceived, and actually the paperwork around the job, and secondly, the advertising and how that gets put out to the contractors. And like in relation to that first comment, like as a small business owner myself, I'm kind of allergic to unnecessary red tape. But I think if we have a look at the nature of some of these businesses that are one or two man bands, that extra load might be unappealing for them to actually do some of that council work. So is there something that we can do to have a look at I guess whether the processes that we've got are fit for purpose for some of those smaller jobs in some of our areas, and making it more appealing for these smaller contractors? Because I mean, it was raised earlier, and it's the importance of local work being done by locals for their own communities. You get a much better job, you get a cheaper job, and those people are accountable to that work in their community. So I think it's really important that we do work out a way to make it more appealing. And with the advertising of it, I don't think, like I know we potentially have to use the GET system, but I think there's an opportunity to actually advertise those jobs and that work available through either community boards or local community advertising mediums to actually get awareness that those jobs are out there. Because I don't think a guy that spends 10 hours a day on his digger is going to come home and go through the GET system and have a look to see what work's available in the local area. So yeah, are there opportunities to advertise differently?
Thanks, Councillor Scott. I can't comment on the advertising, but I know that Matt and Nick and his team have certainly have processes in place to help people with the occupational health and safety side of things. I don't know, Nick, do you want to comment?
Yeah, through your worship. All really good points. We had a really good uptake at that drop-in session. We have registered quite a lot of new contractors and suppliers over the last 12 months into our list that we're regularly sending information out to. I totally agree. GETS is not something that you'd jump onto unless you know that work is there. So happy to have a look and at other ways that we can get that information out. Community boards obviously receive that information in regards to what projects are coming up. And we've recently sent out the list for next year's work as well. One real critical piece of feedback we've actually had from those smaller suppliers and contractors out in the district is their preference is for longer term work, not one-off type small projects. They'd like to make sure that they could actually resource projects adequately across a period of time rather than the sort of one-off $10,000 projects. It's not really appetizing to them. So that's something we're considering as well, is looking at how we could package up nice pieces of work that could go out into that wider market. We have had a really good review of the health and safety procedures, and Terry's done some good work there to simplify that. So it should be a reasonably simple process now for our contractors to be able to do the minimum from a health and safety point of view and register and get approved. So there has been work done, absolutely, but there's always more that we can do.
Thanks, Nick. Councillor Byers, Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to comment Cameron's reflected on the water supply issue in Riverton, and has made a comment around the use of water tanks versus reticulated supply. I'll just note that both of those forms of supplying water into households rely on rainwater. So I'm not sure that this bias against water tanks is particularly valid. It might actually be more an issue of how we're using the water. So I just wanted to signal that that's, not particularly comfortable with this move against people becoming independent with their water by capturing the rain that falls on their roofs.
I don't think it was a move against it, Councillor Byers. It was indicating that there is an issue out there. And I know personally that I'm receiving 2 or 3 phone calls a day from people in the rural sector concerned about the, I think it's up to 6 days now waiting for a tank of water to go out into the rural area. So it is an issue in that regard. But I don't want to preempt what the Chief Executive might be wanting to answer to that.
Oh, look, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Byers. No, I'd hate to have come across as having a view against water tanks. In fact, I depend on water tanks for my own household supply, and I actually make sure we use water accordingly because I know where it comes from. But it is really, I just wanted to make the point that His Worship has picked up on, that we have a number of households across Southland who depend on their tanks, and at the moment those tanks are empty, and the logistics of trying to fill them is putting a real strain on things, and it's a bit of a long wait if you don't have any water.
Thank you for that. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Worship. Just a couple of questions about water, Cameron. So the one, I saw a mention of a Tautau there and the testing that's been done that's revealed must be a very high leakage rate. So is that routine testing we do in every community, or was there something specific about a Tautau that led us to carry that out there?
Through you, Your Worship, I'm probably best placed to respond to that, Councillor Duffy. Look, we've got a number of indicators that we look at across our networks to determine whether or not we may or may not have leakage, and we do that on an ongoing basis, as well as one-off investigations, acoustic sounding of our networks to chase leaks and integrate and prioritise renewals programs. So it's certainly not in isolation to Tautau. As part of our 3-year asset management planning and renewals program development, we're constantly looking at water usage across each of our networks and age and condition, and on the basis of that information, producing or focusing our resources and budgets accordingly.
Thank you. And the other question, which might be a misunderstanding on my part, when I saw water restrictions advertised, I thought I read in that there was putting a stop to water being carted from our supplies elsewhere, and like you were referring to it before about the 6-day wait and so on. So I'm just not sure, have I got that, did I interpret that correctly? And it's just my concern is for areas where we don't have a reticulated supply and we have ratepayers just depending on their tanks. I just wonder sort of where else they can go if we're not going to allow that. But as I say, I might have misunderstood just what was in that notice.
Again, through you, Your Worship, I might be best placed to respond to that question. Councillor Duffy, it's not a binary response, that one, unfortunately, but what I can tell you is that we're very aware of the water restriction issues and the challenges that poses for those members of our communities. And when I say communities, our entire Southland district communities that are reliant on water abstraction for various purposes, be it for potable supply, for animal welfare, for commercial contracting or rural activities. So in instances like this where we do have to implement restrictions, we are attempting to strike the right balance across a number of factors and indicators, including when we anticipate rain might arrive and to what areas of our district, what that means for recharge rates across our networks, and how we might balance the capacity that we have across our networks with the various needs and demands, we have an association with water abstraction and use across the district in its entirety. What I can confirm is that potable water for humanitarian purposes is an absolute priority. So it's always first and foremost at the top of the list. And in fact, it was just yesterday we were meeting a number of staff with myself, and we discussed the development of a policy that wraps a bit more transparency and prioritization around the utilization of water in times of restriction, and perhaps an opportunity to connect in with Services and Assets Committee in a discussion on, I think it's either the 13th or 14th of April when we next connect. Is that does that address your concerns or?
No, it's a good explanation. Thank you, Matt.
Okay. Thank you for that, Matt. And just further to those points, we do know that we're in a bit of a dire situation here, and Matt mentioned the recharge. That is the issue that's been raised nationally with Minister O'Connor, I believe through Fed Farmers, that these aquifers will take some time to recharge. And I think it's 9 days, or it might be 7 days now before any sort of rain is expected to run off roofs into tanks. And that won't be felt with the aquifers for quite some time. So there are some major concerns in certain areas of Southland, and they are being monitored by the likes of Fed Farmers, our team at Southland District Council, and of course Emergency Management Southland. Are there any other questions in regards to the Chief Executive's report?
Sorry, Your Worship, just in relation to that last question and discussion, I might just add that it's an issue that we have an eye on, both for dealing with in the short term as well as the long term. So what paying close attention to the assumptions and forecast assumptions from a climate change and weather implications for our aquifers and our water sources across the district in the short, medium and long term, and what that might mean from an investment perspective, as well as to His Worship's point, staying connected with Environment Southland, Emergency Management Southland, and our other local government partners, including Fed Farmers and others. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Matt. And I've been asked to look at local declarations, but at this stage it's not required, because we've got we can use section 330 of the Resource Management Act if required. And I know, as Councillor Kramer has pointed out, there is quite a monitoring of a water scheme up there that's getting quite low. Councillor Owen, Councillor Duffy.
Thank you. I was just wondering, like obviously people on tank water are probably a little bit more used to knowing how to conserve water, but I'm wondering at what point we put out some stronger education messages for those on reticulated supplies around conservation measures. And yeah, I just wondered about those little tips and stuff like that, if that's triggered at some point to do that. Like I know that there's the no using your sprinklers, but there's a lot more that that people can do to conserve their water use. At what point are we serious enough to trigger those sort of community education messages that would help?
Through your worship, that's something we are constantly looking at, Councillor Owen, and it's a really good point because there is a difference in how we and whether or not we go straight to restrictions or how we scale that messaging depending on the anticipated trajectory and difficulties that we anticipate we may or may not experience at a particular time of the year, most notably summer. So it's something that we do need to continue to look at, ensuring that education piece is robust, because it does have a significant impact on how people utilise their water.
Thank you, Councillor. Oh no, Councillor Duffy's got his hand down. That's right.
Yeah, so I was going to make the same point as Councillor Owens just made.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more comments around the management report? Thank you. I think the one that Councillor Menzies brought up earlier in regards to getting back to some sort of normal with our meetings, and I know you've mentioned that in the report, Mr. McIntosh. That's would be great to, once we do know the full story, to start meeting in person. I've forgotten what you all look like from your shoulders down. Okay.
I just haven't got any smaller.
There had to be someone speak up about that. I'm just worried about your hand, Councillor Duffy. Okay. All right. I'm happy to move the management report. Is there a seconder? Councillor Harper, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you once again to you and your team, Cameron, for everything that's happening in the background. I think the next item's the election stuff. Yeah, so the next item on the agenda is the update on the 2022 triennial elections, and who is speaking to that one? Sorry. Robin.
Good morning, Your Worship and Councillors. As you'll be aware, this report is to provide an update on the 2022 triennial elections, and it also seeks a decision on the order candidate names should appear on voting documents. So this report outlines the representation arrangements that are in place. It outlines that a first past the post electoral system will be used, and it highlights key dates relating to the elections. So key dates are included in the recommendations with this report. And these can be viewed on page 210. On the 15th of July, nominations open, and these can be lodged until 12 August 2022. And voting documents will be distributed from 16 September, and election day this year is on 8 October 2022. So regulations allow council to choose the order that candidate names can appear on voting documents. So there's 3 options available to council, and these are alphabetical, which is by surname, pseudo-random, so this is when the order of names is drawn out of a hat and all voting documents use the same order, or random, which is when each voting paper has a different order of candidate names. So staff are recommending a random order be selected. In 2019, council chose to have names in a random order, and 57% of other councils across New Zealand also selected to use random. So the recommendations for this report I mentioned are on page 210, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Robin. We've just lost Fiona. She's just rung me. I don't know. Are you back yet, Fiona? Just reluctant to carry on until we relink with Fiona. I'll give her a ring. Just think of those questions in the meantime.
Shite. Excuse me.
Okay, welcome back, Fiona. Right, so any questions of Robin? Councillor Duffy.
Yes, I'm just wondering, and I see it was quite a small percentage that used the pseudo random option. Given that quite a demographic of our sizable demographic in Southland are in the older age bracket, and I'm just wondering if a consistent listing of names would be simpler for that sector of our community, given that young people will figure it out anyway. But I mean, whether we agree with it or not, we know that a lot of elderly couples will do their voting together. And I just wonder how, about them possibly being confused when it's on one list in a certain order and then the other list in a different one. I'm just sort of raising that as a thought. Everyone else might think it's ridiculous, but given the trouble I had the other day reading the instructions to do a damn COVID test, I can see that whatever we do to make things simpler for people is probably the best result.
This is the time to discuss it and make that decision. So your point is taken, Councillor Duffy. Councillor Harper.
Yes, Your Worship, I would actually totally agree with Paul's comments there, because as to say, we get a couple of elderly people side by side, and they tick the top three. One ticks the top three, the other said, "Oh, we'll just do the same," and yeah, and you get a result that's not actually what it should be. So yeah, that's just my comment. The rest of it looks pretty good to me.
So what am I hearing? That you'd prefer them to be alphabetical? Councillor Harper.
No, not necessarily alphabetical. I prefer them to be the second one, which the order of name is drawn out of the hat, but all voting documents using the same order.
Yep, cool. Councillor Owen.
Yep.
I was just going to suggest that if people were going to sit side by side and just tick the top three without much further thought, then it's probably better that they're all random, if that's the amount of thought that's going into the process.
I don't think that's across the board, but I do understand that sometimes that happens at the last minute. But yeah, we can't rely on that. Well, I would hope that it's the same. It doesn't happen all the time. So any further thoughts in regards to this quite important decision for those that are standing in October? All right, so the recommendations are as they stand, is what I'm hearing. Okay, is there a councillor in a position to move that recommendations A through to F? Councillor Fraser, seconder. Councillor Owen. So that's have we lost? Oh no, Fiona's still there. Move Councillor Fraser, seconded Councillor Owen. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you for your work on that.
I would have voted against that, Gary. Sorry.
Oh,
it's okay.
Would you like your dissenting vote recorded, Councillor Duffy?
Oh, why not? Yeah,
Yep.
May as well get. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Duffy. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the resource management delegations. Quite a big document with a considerable number of delegations there, and we'll hear from Marcus in regards to this report.
Kia ora, Your Worship and councillors. Thanks for attending or letting me put a report up to council today. Effectively, this paper seeks an amendment to the existing Resource Management Act delegations. Effectively, the drivers for this are there's been a new role created within the resource management team for a team leader for monitoring enforcement. So the changes to the delegation reflect that new role and giving that person powers and also giving additional powers to the manager for the environmental health. So currently that person, that role is Erin Keeble. So making sure that there's a sufficient delegation there for the manager of that department. There was previously the delegation was to an officer level. So with the changes, we're just seeking an amendment to that. There's also a couple of changes in the delegation around enforcement. So seeking powers to the Group Manager, Infrastructure and Environmental Services under Section 9 of the Resource Management Act to enforce the district plan, and also Section 338, which is about lodging prosecutions. So making sure that council has got the ability to lodge prosecutions where necessary for breaches to the district plan. The final change is around a delegation for determining objections to additional charges under the Resource Management Act. So that is towards the bottom of that document, Section 357B, effectively seeking delegation to the group manager for determining objections to costs where they are less than $5,000. So previously we've seen consent applicants object to additional charges under the Resource Management Act, and that process has required reports to be written and a paper go up to the Regulatory and Consents Committee. So seeking a delegation there to try and deal with some of the smaller sums that are being disputed through the Resource Management Act charges. So yeah, happy for any questions or comments from council today.
Thank you, Marcus. As I say, a lot of powers there. And are there any comments or questions? I don't know, Councillor Duffy, if you've got any matters you want to raise in it.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I'd just like to comment in my role as chairman of the Regulatory and Consents Committee. I support this. I think it's about efficiency and practicality. At the same time, I would expect, and I'm sure it will happen, that there's a good line of reporting back to both the committee and the full council of the decisions made that are of relevance and well, they're all of relevance to the back to the governing body.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Councillor Ford.
Thanks, Gary. Just remembering that as elected members, we get the flack on all these enforcement type things. So it shouldn't be taken lightly as to how staff do manage that. You know, we need to get on with the job. We don't want to be encumbered with too many things, but certainly enforcement, all valid, but we need to keep things working. So just the very fact that we get the flack on it, and we would need to know how to answer that.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. And yeah, I know that Marcus and his team, it's a last resort is prosecution, and it comes with a lot of decisions, and obviously a lot of conversations with the offender, so to speak, the alleged offender. So it's the last resort, and I acknowledge that.
I was just thinking that sometimes people are too scared to ask because they think they'll get a no, and you know we need to enable it as easy as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments or questions around this quite extensive report? All right, I'm happy to move the report as it sits. Is there a seconder?
I'm happy to second, Gary.
Seconded by Councillor Duffy. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. That's the end of the agenda for this council meeting. I did fail to mention at the end of the one in regards to the elections that the Vote 2022, for those that are out there listening in cyberspace, is I think the first meeting 7 o'clock on Thursday night on our Facebook, as well as Invercargill City, Gore and Environment Southland. So that would be well worth those that are intending to stand or restand to maybe just stop and have a listen. I think there's 3 of those proposed over the next few weeks. All right, thank you everyone for your attendance. Thank you to staff and management for preparation of the agenda and for councillors. And we're going to just go offline and have a workshop for a little while.